Welcome back to WION World is One. You're watching Speed News with me, Vidur Kathuria. Let's get started. Two National Guard soldiers were critically injured in a shooting near the White House. The suspect, identified as a 29-year-old Afghan national, has been taken into custody. US President Donald Trump was in Florida at the time of the shooting. He called the incident an act of terror and vowed to re-examine Afghan nationals who entered the United States in 2021 during the Biden regime. He also announced the deployment of 500 additional military personnel in Washington in the aftermath of the incident.
We must now re-examine every single alien who has entered our country from Afghanistan under Biden, and we must take all necessary measures to ensure the removal of any alien from any country who does not.
US President Donald Trump announced that South Africa would not be invited to next year's G20 summit in Miami, escalating his diplomatic offensive against the country. Trump cited what he described as horrific human rights abuses endured by white farmers, and South Africa's refusal to symbolically hand off the G20 presidency at the end of this year's summit to the United States. US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announced that the United States plans to expand the deployment of troops and aircraft to intensify the fight against drug trafficking, particularly in the Caribbean. The Dominican Republic has become the first major public partner in this effort, agreeing to allow temporary US use of restricted areas at two key facilities. Pentagon Chief Hegseth urges other countries to allow US forces as well as the Dominican Republic's President Luis Abinader stated the purpose is to strengthen the air and maritime protection ring against transnational organized crime. Hamas has called on mediating countries to pressure Israel to allow safe passage for dozens of its fighters holed up in tunnels in the southern Gaza Strip. The request came after the Israeli military said it killed over 20 Hamas members over the past week who attempted to flee from the underground terror infrastructure in the area and apprehended 8 more. It was the first time the Islamist group had publicly acknowledged that its members were trapped in the tunnels. Pope Leo XVI is embarking on his first international trip with a visit to Turkey and Lebanon, a journey taking place amid regional tensions. The trip begins in the Turkish capital of Ankara, where the pontiff is expected to arrive shortly after midday. His schedule includes an official meeting with President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and a significant address to authorities, civil society, and the diplomatic corps before he travels to Istanbul in the early evening. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has confirmed that talks to end the war in Ukraine are being taken seriously by Russia, but characterized a final deal as still being distant. Peskov confirmed that US envoy Steve Witkoff is set to visit Moscow next week for further negotiations. This news comes amid ongoing efforts, largely brokered by the US, to finalize a peace framework between Russia and Ukraine. Clashes broke out between Bulgarian police and demonstrators as several thousand citizens protested outside the parliament in Sofia. The anger was directed at the 2026 draft budget, which is set to raise taxes and contributions while boosting public sector pay. The opposition claimed this was fundamentally designed to conceal widespread corruption. Ecuadorian President Daniel Noboa swore in a new military command led by General Henry Delgado, emphasizing the need for firm action against terrorism and drug trafficking amid the country's severe crime wave. This public appearance followed his defeat in the November 16th referendum, where proposals like allowing foreign military bases and constitutional reforms were rejected. The The Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade is set to kick off in New York City with balloons of Buzz Lightyear and Pac-Man set to take the skies and floats featuring Labubu and Lego gracing the streets for the annual celebration. A star-studded lineup of performances including Conan Gray and Lainey Wilson will be sprinkled throughout the show. Along with a slew of marching bands, dancers and cheerleaders, the parade is expected to feature 34 balloons, 4 mini balloons, 28 floats, 33 clown groups and 11 marching bands, all leading the way for Santa Claus. Among the new balloons being featured is a large onion carriage featuring 8 characters from the world of Shrek. Netflix hit K-pop Demon Hunters will also be represented in the sky with the characters Derpy Tiger and Susie. A woman was killed and a man was seriously injured in a shark attack on a beach near a popular surf spot on Australia's east coast. Emergency services were called to Kylie's Beach at Crowdy Bay near Port Macquarie, about 350 kilometers north of Sydney, after the shark attack. Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu has declared a nationwide security emergency as the country scrambles to respond to a wave of mass kidnappings that have seen hundreds of people, mostly school children, captured in a week. The president ordered the deployment of more security forces and approved the hiring of 50,000 new police recruits and additional personnel into the armed forces. Tinubu urged the National Assembly to review laws to permit states to establish their own police forces. A group of army officers said they had seized power in coup-prone Guinea-Bissau a day before the expected announcement of results from a closely contested presidential election. In a statement broadcast on state television, the officers said they had deposed President Umaru Sissoco Embalo, suspended the electoral process, closed borders and imposed a curfew. They announced the formation of the High Military Command for the restoration of order, which would govern the West African nation until further notice. Authorities say the death toll from Hong Kong's deadliest fire in 3 decades rose to more than 40 as firefighters battled to extinguish a huge blaze that ripped through high-rise residential towers, sheathed in flammable bamboo scaffolding. As hundreds of people remain missing in the city's worst fire in decades, police have arrested 3 men on suspicion of manslaughter. Germany's holiday season officially kicked off with the opening of the Striezel market in Dresden, one of the nation's oldest Christmas fairs. The Christmas market was surrounded by street barricades amid heightened security measures. Enhanced protective measures at German markets have been a priority since previous deadly attacks in Berlin and Magdeburg. Dresden Mayor Dirk Hilbert inaugurated the 1434 market, named after the stolen fruit bread, by slicing into a 2-meter loaf, officially welcoming the holiday season. Chief Election Commissioner Gyanesh Kumar is all set to assume the chair of the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, or IIDEA, for the year 2026. Kumar will take over on December 3rd in the meeting of the Council of Member States of IDEA that will be held in Stockholm. As chair, the Chief Election Commissioner will preside over all council meetings during 2026. Indian authorities have arrested a young lawyer in the northern state of Haryana on charges of espionage for Pakistan's inter-services intelligence. or ISI. The arrest made in the New district marks the third time this year a suspect has been detained in the region on allegations of working for Pakistani intelligence. The accused, identified as Rizwan, who practiced law in local courts, is allegedly tied to a network funneling money into India via Hawala channels for terrorist and espionage activities. A case has been registered against him under anti-national activities. The air quality in the national capital of India, Delhi, remained in the very poor category, with the air quality index reading at 355. The city has now been grappling with hazardous pollution levels for the past 13 days. The latest assessment comes a day after the Commission for Air Quality Management revoked all restrictions under Stage 3 of the Graded Response Action Plan. Floods and landslides in Indonesia's North Sumatra province have resulted in at least 24 deaths, with 5 people still missing. The disaster was triggered by a tropical cyclone that brought heavy rains and caused the Malacca Strait to overflow, affecting regions like Sibolga and central Tapanuli, where communications and power has been cut. The flooding has also impacted West Sumatra, with fallen trees blocking roads and excavators working to clear mud and find missing people. China's Commerce Ministry has agreed with the European Union to press chipmakers Nexperia's Dutch and Chinese units to resolve their corporate standoff, effectively sidestepping the Dutch government. The move comes after The Hague last week suspended its 30th September seizure of the Chinese-owned Netherlands-based chipmaker Nexperia, a step short of Beijing's demands for a full reversal. Following that seizure, Nexperia's Chinese unit declared itself independent from the European headquarters, which in turn responded by cutting off water shipments to the company's Chinese plant. The Commerce Ministry's latest statement marks the first time Beijing has promised to push for a company-led solution with the EU. Hackers are taking control of US radio transmission equipment to broadcast fake emergency alerts and obscene language, according to the Federal Communications Commission, or FCC. In a public notice, the FCC said a recent string of cyber intrusions had triggered the emergency alert system's attention signal, which is the shrill tone that usually precedes official warnings about tornadoes, hurricanes and earthquakes and other dangers. The Commission said the attackers appeared to have breached poorly secured equipment made by Swiss audio firm Embarks, then reconfigured it to play hacker-controlled audio instead of legitimate station programming. Affected stations ended up broadcasting audio feeds inserted by the hackers, including real or simulated emergency alert tones, obscenities, and other inappropriate content. Chinese regulators have barred TikTok owner ByteDance from using Nvidia chips in new data centers, according to a report by The Information. The move comes after ByteDance purchased more Nvidia chips than any other Chinese firm in 2025, as it sought to secure computing powers for its billion-plus users amid fears of further US export restrictions. The reported ban highlights China's drive to cut dependence on US technology, a push that has accelerated as US tightens rules on advanced semiconductor exports to China. In August, regulators told Chinese companies to stop placing new orders for Nvidia AI chips and have since urged them to shift to domestically made processors, according to a report by Bloomberg. Japan's Asahi Group said it aims to normalize logistical operations by February after a late September cyber-attack forced a widespread suspension of order processing, shipping and call centers. The beverage maker, known for its super dry beer, also warns that personal details of 1.52 million customers may have been leaked in the 29th September cyber-attack. The disruption left restaurants, bars and shops across Japan running low on Asahi drinks. Production resumed at 6 domestic factories the following week, but while logistical operations should be back to normal by February, Asahi said not all products will be ready to ship by then. A US-based advocacy group has filed a lawsuit in Washington accusing Apple of using minerals linked to conflict and human rights abuses in the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda, despite Apple's denials. The new lawsuit seeks a court declaration that Apple's conduct violates consumer protection law, an injunction to stop alleged deceptive marketing and reimbursement of legal costs, but does not seek monetary damages or class certification. Meta Platforms has hit out at EU antitrust regulators, accusing them of making aberrant information requests during 2 investigations 4 years ago. The company, which previously compared the EU's demands over Facebook and online classified ads to a fishing trawler, said the real issue is whether regulators face any limits on their power and whether there is effective judicial oversight. Meta had challenged the European Commission's request at a lower tribunal, but after losing that bid, has now taken its appeal to EU Court of Justice. A week ago, many on Wall Street were closing the books on 2025 rate cuts by the Federal Reserve. They were citing the lack of economic data and general uncertainty. Now, top economists, including at JP Morgan, are predicting the central bank will cut rates next month after all. JP Morgan's U-turn aligns with the market perspective of swaps traders. Money markets are presently pricing a roughly 80% chance that the Fed will ease policy by a quarter point next week. That's up from less than 30% a week ago. With a deeply divided Fed and political pressure increasing, what the central bank does is likely to drive markets through to the end of the year. The pound is slightly stronger and gilt yields are lower following the UK's autumn budget, but the lack of upfront tax hikes complicates the Bank of England's efforts to cut interest rates, even if a December move remains likely. The UK's budget is out after a chaotic early release, and for investors, the news is not entirely welcome. But beneath the surface, the story is more nuanced. For all the talk of a significant fiscal hole over recent weeks, the economic forecast revisions shaved only a marginal amount from the government's fiscal headroom. So, a smaller fiscal hole means the degree of fiscal consolidation required was more modest too, while tax hikes add up to an additional $26 billion per year in revenue by 2029-30. Virtually none of this will come through in 2026. Things look brighter for finance professionals. Wall Street's macro traders are headed for their best year since the financial crisis. This comes as clients rush to place bets on changing interest rate policies by central banks around the world. Firms including Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan and Citigroup are expected to generate $165 billion in revenue from trading in fixed income, credit and commodities this year. That is up to 10% from 2024. Interest rate adjustments by global central banks, uncertainty around tariffs, concerns over ballooning fiscal deficits and a steepening yield curve have bolstered the fee pool for rate traders in particular. In the G10 rates businesses, revenue is expected to reach a 5-year high of $40 billion this year. India has been officially announced as the host of the 2030 Commonwealth Games. This will be the second time India hosts the event, and it is seen as a stepping stone for the country's bid to host the Olympics in 2036. Ahmedabad has been chosen ahead of the Nigerian capital of Abuja by the governing body of Commonwealth sport. India last hosted the Commonwealth Games in 2010. However, the Delhi Games were overshadowed by poor planning and allegations of corruption. Uzbekistan's Javokhir Sindarov has made history. The 19-year-old has become the youngest chess World Cup champion. The Grandmaster defeated China's Wei Yi in a thrilling tiebreak. The final went into rapid tiebreakers after both classical games ended in draws. In the first rapid game, Sindarov missed a one-move win, allowing Wei Yi to hold a draw. But in the second game, the Uzbek star held his nerve as Wei struggled under time pressure, eventually resigning after 60 moves. Marking the 17th anniversary of the 26/11 attacks, Bollywood star Amitabh Bachchan lent his voice to a new animated tribute film. The short film honoured the victims and heroes of the tragedy and was unveiled on November 26th. The movie recounts how the spirit of Mumbai remained unbroken even as terrorists killed 166 people and injured around 300. Akshay Kumar and other Bollywood stars also paid their respects on social media, remembering those who lost their lives in 2008.